Hey Lisa, thank you for joining me today for this conversation.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Extremely excited to talk with you today. The purpose of our conversation today is really to highlight the heart and soul of the people in our community and the amazing work we do, and also share some best practices and thoughts from experts around the community. It's an extreme honor and pleasure to have this conversation with you, as you're one of the longest standing client partners and clients of Seed Trust, and somebody I greatly respect in the field in terms of setting standards and giving back and all you do with seeds and even within your business. So excited to chat with you today. Do you want to start by introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your business or businesses?
Thanks. Sure. So my name is Lisa Stark Hughes. I have been a surrogate myself twice. I carried a set of twins first, then a single. I have six of my own children, five of which I carried, and then a stepson through marriage. So I So personally, I actually did my first surrogacy journey to kind of help fund going to law school. So I started law school while I was pregnant, and I really became fascinated with how the different laws in every single state in the country. So for those that don't know, um, all of the laws are not only different, but they're all based on different legal concepts. So like from the very beginning, they've grown from different places, and I found that really fascinating. And so after my first surrogacy, I started working for a surrogacy agency, and then when that agency was put up for sale, then I started my own. So I started GS Moms. Oh, it's 2025. So like 15 years ago now. It's been a minute. And then we also expanded into Uganda. I worked with the government there on regulating surrogacy because it had already been going on there for over 20 years, and kind of bringing the ethical practices to surrogacy there in Uganda. So GS Moms is in the U.S. and then Host Moms Uganda is in Uganda.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about each of them independently for a bit. Tell us a bit about GS Moms and the clients you serve and what makes your offering there special.
So initially with GS Moms, we started out kind of focusing on the international parent market, mostly because the company that I had worked for in the past, um, only worked with domestic parents. And so to make sure that there wasn't any like conflict or overlap or anything, we've just kept it very clear. And I worked with just international intended parents. And so we developed a program that really focused on not only best practices here in the US, but working with the cultures of like where the parents are coming from, kind of so everyone got to learn about, you know, new things, new countries, everything. So that was neat. One thing that's different about GS Moms is that we as an agency do not set our benefit packages for our surrogates. So all of our surrogates get to set their own fee schedules. We're happy to provide things like here is the going, averages of your area, those types of things, and kind of guide them through that process. But we do not have a set benefit package. And we do that intentionally because personally, I believe that when an agency has a set benefit package, as you're trying to attract, more surrogates, you do what a job would do, right? You keep raising those rates to try
Right.
and attract people. And I think that that kind of artificially inflates the market. And so what this does is not only does everybody get to choose their own benefit package, but intended parents now can look for a surrogate that fits their budget, and they can decide if that, is worth it to them to pay the higher fee or not, or whatever. So it kind of works, but it's also negotiable. So if you see a surrogate that you really like, but hey, they're just a little bit outside of our budget, then the surrogate can choose if she wants to do, to lower that for those parents or not. So it kind of brings in the market pressures to kind of help balance, I feel, the compensation and trying to keep things more affordable for everyone. And then we're a full service agency, so we work with intended parents and surrogates all the way from the beginning, all the way through until, long after delivery when everything has been paid, everyone's back home, um, everything, and then we can finally, close things out. So we also all of our journeys are a little bit unique because we're trying to make them exactly what each match is looking for. So not only the intended parents, but also the surrogates. What kind of relationship are they wanting? What kind of relationship are they wanting not only with us, but also with the intended parents? And we, kind of tailor make that instead of trying to make everybody fit into a set system. Like, this is how we do it here. Now, we do have, the guidelines, the standards with steeds that we always follow. So there are obviously some non-negotiable items, but there's a lot of flexibility in things like, how often, we're talking to you and how much we're handling and all of that to make sure that everything is what's best for that particular match.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned costs in the US and, having ways to try to make flexibility to make it affordable for different folks. And knowing you and knowing that's also a big reason why you started looking internationally and in Uganda. So do you want to talk a little bit about the kind of why Uganda, why international, and then talk about your program there?
Sure. So initially, I wasn't looking at all to go outside of the US. It was actually the government of Uganda that reached out to me with questions. And so they've been doing surrogacy there now for, pushing almost 30 years. And the way that their government is set up is every district has their regular member of parliament, but then they also have a women's member of parliament that is only elected by women, and her job is to advocate for women's issues in parliament. So obviously, there's a lot of these women and some of them have fertility issues, as you would expect. And so, kind of through their own fertility journey to grow their own family, some of them ended up looking into surrogacy, obviously, looked into surrogacy in their own country, and they realized that while it's legal and it's there and it's available, every hospital was doing that, like had their own program and was doing it a little differently, and there weren't really protections, not only for the surrogates themselves or for the intended parents. You just had to kind of sign up with the system, whichever program you liked, and kind of hoped it went well. And a lot of the programs there are the only professional is the hospital. So you have they do the IVF, they do all the antenatal care, the delivery. There aren't attorneys, except for the attorney would have, the IVF clinic would have an attorney to draft up their forms, but that was kind of it. You didn't get to know your surrogate. So there just weren't a lot of protections. And so those women really wanted that to change because they they take their job really seriously about advocating for women's issues. And so they felt like they needed to advocate not only for intended mothers, but also for the surrogates themselves. And so they went on this journey of trying to figure out what the best regulations were. And by the time they got to me, they'd already been debating regulations for like 3 years. They'd already taken a whole delegation to India because a lot of the hospitals there were saying like, this is the best program. We pattern our programs after this. And they went there, they took doctors and attorneys and, politicians, ministers of health to look at the system in India. And, as we kind of would have expected, they were not impressed that that was a good system to follow. And so they kept looking and they looked to the US. I actually have a friend that used to live in the US that was working in the office of the president. And so he just recommended, he was in a meeting and he just said, well, I know someone that might be willing to answer some of your questions. And so he reached out to me and he just said, hey, here's what they've been working on. Would you mind just hopping on a Zoom call and just, answering some of their questions about how it's done? And so that's kind of how it started. And then I ended up being invited by the Office of the President to go to Uganda, and they set up all these meetings of anybody who could possibly have an opinion about surrogacy from, ministers of health, doctors, intended parents, surrogates, midwives, the Attorneys Association, the Interreligious Council, so the heads of all the religious organizations in Uganda, and I spoke with all of them, and then I made my recommendation. Here's how it could work well with your culture, and I think it would be great. And then they actually asked me to start a program to kind of create a benchmark because they felt like they, even if regulations were created, they could spend all this time policing, but if everyone just kept continuing to do it how they were doing, it's just harder for them. But if there is a market force there that is doing it better, why would surrogates sign up for another program? Like, why would intended parents go to another program? So it created a reason, like a market reason for all of those other programs to kind of step it up and to change. So not just follow the regulations, but like an actual competition reason for them to step it up and do better. And so um, there's some things that are a little different about our Uganda program than in the US. We follow all of the US standards, but we also, so in Uganda, about 90% of people are self-employed. And they have a high percentage of people with university degrees. They have a highly educated populace. They speak English, but there's not a lot of jobs where you can like be an employee. There's some, but a lot of the advancement is really in starting and running your own business. And so this idea actually came from the Interreligious Council, where they didn't want to put a limit on how many times someone could be a surrogate, but they also did not want the surrogates to feel like being a surrogate was now their job, and replacing having a job. And so they said that in an ideal world, what they would like is for the surrogates to use their surrogacy compensation as startup capital for business because they have a huge need for startup capital, and not a lot of options on where to get that because they don't do debt really. It's like not a part of their culture in Uganda to have credit cards or debt. So we created an entrepreneurship program and a financial literacy program for all of our surrogates. So, like on their profile, you'll actually see what her plan is, and she'll have a full business plan. She'll have all of the payments like mapped out. Here's what she's planning on doing. And the nice thing is, not only does that change her life for her and her family, but it actually changed the lives for the whole community because now she's employing people and, there's more options, whatever her service or new business is. So it's really neat to see that impact that we don't necessarily get to see here in the US.
Yeah, I love that. Are there any restrictions or things people should know when considering your Uganda program or Uganda as a destination for surrogacy?
So it's not really because of their anti-gay law. I would not recommend it right now for gay couples. That law is being challenged in their Supreme Court or Constitutional Court right now. So, that can always change, but for right now, that's not really an option. It is an option though for single parents, and traditional couples as well.
Great. And tell me a bit about parentage in Uganda, how that works.
So it actually works the same way as in the US. So the standard process is a pre-birth order, which means there's all the legal documents and you get a court order from the court during the pregnancy that says, it's your baby, your name's going to go on the birth certificate. There is a window, a 60-day window where we can do a post-birth order for countries where that is a better option. So for example, like Australia and the UK. Both of those prefer that the surrogate kind of reconfirm um, the parentage and the process after delivery. And so it does allow for that, but the default process is a pre-birth order. And so the parents' names are always on the birth certificate.
Great. Well, having known you for a long time and knowing how meticulous you are and thoughtful you are around the way things are set up and ethics and rules are applied, I'm sure it's very well organized and conducted. So, um, that's wonderful. I think maybe now, let's jump back to like a bigger picture and talk about surrogacy as a whole.
Okay.
So, and I like to, when people look at our industry and people are new to surrogacy, they've gone through a lot typically, or getting to surrogacy is such an emotional process. And as you know, it's complex, expensive, emotional. And when they come into it, there's so much information coming at them, right? Everybody's saying their program is this, the other program's this, and people are selling. You know, what would you say, aside from who they'd pick, would be the best advice, or what would you say is the absolute best advice you could give a set of intended parents that are considering surrogacy and trying to decide how to navigate this, which partners to select, and how to improve their chance of a successful and happy journey?
So I know a lot of parents really wish that surrogacy was like a checklist, right? Like you can just go down and like, okay, I've done this, I've done this, I've this, and everything will go perfectly. And the problem is that even if you do everything right, like there's still a nature component that nobody can control that you just can't guarantee that everything is going to always go perfectly. So having somebody in the field that is there for you, that has like been around the block in this industry, for years is irreplaceable. And I know a lot of parents will balk at agency fees and things like that, but um, really being knowing someone to call, you have somebody in your corner that can call and say, it's okay, I have seen this before, we know exactly who to call. This professional has dealt with this situation. This is to have that Rolodex, because whenever you're hiring an agency, you're not really just hiring that agency, right? You're hiring all of their contacts and all of the people, their whole network, because, we can call in if something happens, we know who to call and we can, to get help on something, multiple times. People have called you, Adam, to say, hey, here's what happened on this case. Can you help us? And you always step up and help. And that's true for, a good agency will do that, which is part of the reason why a lot of times you'll hear a recommendation to make sure that you don't use a brand new agency. Use someone that's been around for 5 years at least. And the reason why 5 years is kind of that minimum is because most cases actually go well. And it takes a while for you to not only possibly have cases that don't go well, but also, and people to see how you handle that, but also to hear about other cases that have not gone well, for you to be like in that loop. Um, because in the news, you'll always hear about the cases that like go sideways, right? That's the only ones that you hear. But I don't even think it's probably even 1%, right? That even goes sideways.
Yeah, I
But
think
it,
when we look at the numbers, it's less than 1% of troublesome cases. And those aren't the ones you see on the news. They're a fraction of a percent. Just ones
right,
that have more difficulties or back and forth, but those are the ones that get the attention. Right.
right, exactly. And so having somebody that, okay, we've handled this before and that has a reputation for being there for you when things go wrong. Because believe it or not, there are agencies that if something goes wrong, they're like, oh, yep, well, not our fault. Good luck with that. And so while people think that agencies compete, and I'm not saying that we don't, people, a good agency will tell you, you know, yes, that's a great agency. I'm happy to refer intended parents to another agency, that I know is good and is going to handle that well. And there's a lot of agencies that will do that. So knowing, have that they have that experience, that they have that reputation for going to bat for their surrogates, for their intended parents, is really irreplaceable. So I think that really finding the right agency is really what's going to help make everything else go more smoothly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the agency in the surrogacy and explantation process really sits in the center and coordinates everything and is the party closest to all aspects of the journey. And that trust in the agency and also that likable working relationship is absolutely critical, because they're the first one to be aware of and dealing with every issue that comes up, right?
Right. And we're
And
the ones that start to hear the rumblings, like
yeah,
before things really go south. So it's just I think it's irreplaceable. And if your agency does a really good job, you'll probably wonder what they did. Like, did they really do anything? I wonder if it was worth it. That actually means that they did a good job.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, one thing you're kind of leaning into is in these journeys, we really want the parents and the surrogates or donors to focus on the beautiful on the journey and creating their family or helping a family create a family, and not have to be bogged down with the process stress around the money, around the harder legal conversations, etc., more than necessary. Right. So allowing the agency and the professionals to navigate through that and the true conversations to be the happy ones is better. What do you think is most important for parents to think about when they think about how to select a surrogate or their relationship with their surrogate or things within the journey to make the process and relationship better?
So it's kind of like a dating relationship, right? Or like a marriage. You really want somebody, this is a relationship that you're going to, at a very, very minimum, be in for a year. Like, and chances are for years to come. And so it really does need to be somebody that you kind of click with. And while a lot of parents want to look at things like, well, what's her age? And is she married? And is she this? And is she that? And here's her history. And here's what all of that is going to be handled by the professionals. What you need to look at is this someone that I can be friends with? Right? That's really what you want because part of what you were talking about before is your agency and the professionals around you are the ones that should handle all the logistics so that you can just focus on that relationship with your surrogate, with your egg donor, and, enjoy the ultrasound photos and the doctor's appointments and getting to go through kind of those joyful experiences and experience the pregnancy as much as you can. Like you're already not able to do it, but if you can experience it as much as you can, and that's actually what most surrogates want, is for you to be as much a part of the process as you can. And they're willing to, they understand like you might live in a different time zone or whatever, but to just really build that relationship. And that's why you should always do like there should be a video match call at least always. There always should be. And and you should know from that. Now everyone's going to be nervous, so if have that phone call and you're like all of my questions I just forgot, that's fine. But you can be flexible, but just focus on, is this the kind of person that I could be friends with?
That's great advice. That's absolutely great advice. While we're talking about parents, given that Seed Trust is the escrow company, and I think that working well and being understood is important. What common questions or misunderstandings do you see that parents have or intended parents have around the financial aspects or escrow? Or what tension points do you see that come up that could be avoided?
Um, as far as some misunderstandings or kind of a misexpectation is sometimes parents think um that they're not going to have any like choice or notification or anything about all the payments that go out, like everybody's just going to spend all their money or something. And that's not how it works. I mean, Seed Trust is great. You have a specific like team of case managers. They get a copy of the contract. They're going to follow every single payment. And if there's anything that is outside of that contract, they push back on it. And it's funny because let's say intended parents say, "Oh, I want to send them a gift for my surrogate's family, a gift for Christmas." Guess what? I can guarantee you that is not in the contract. And we actually need to have that like in writing with you approving, like, this is the link, this is how much it's going to be, whatever, before escrow is going to approve it. Like, you guys are really diligent about making sure that only the things that are supposed to go out. And, if there's a question, then they ask for more documentation. So I'd say that's probably the biggest one. Also with Seed Trust, there's an option where they can get notifications, when payments go out. Of course, there's the one thing we really love about Seed Trust is the full transparency. Like, they can log into the portal and they can pull up every single bill. Like, they can see, okay, yes, insurance paid this much and this, only that amount was paid. There isn't any questions, but they don't need to have the hassle of processing all of that paperwork and submitting it. Like, it's just there, it's ready if they want to. And, because parents have different personalities. So some are really anal about those things, and that's really important to them to like check every single payment. And for others, they're like, I'll just look at it at the end, or, monthly or something. And so it's nice to have that full transparency, but to also have that dedicated team of people that are really looking out to make sure that everything is exact, what's getting paid is exactly what should be getting paid.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And it's often something that I overlook as something being misunderstood because it's so core to our nature and to why we exist. And as you know, when we came into the industry, this was not the case. Escrow didn't really do this. This was kind of a new concept that escrow was going to take this responsibility and ultimately liability. And we take a lot of pride in being the ones to innovate and continue to push that directive. And even when it comes to the agencies, once the GSA is in place, it's the escrow's responsibility to make sure it's either in the contract or approved. And anything we approve outside of that is our risk and responsibility, so we don't do it, right? So our team has to be diligent, and we hope that that creates a nice check and balance even between the agency and escrow and the parents. Um, and it should give everybody peace of mind, right? Because the agency, in most cases, what's happening with a bill is the agency is checking it. The agencies also get notified of anything going through the portal being submitted, both at the case manager or caseworker level and at the owner level. They're also putting eyes on it that our team is checking it. And then our team is being checked by two other teams internally before payment goes out. So there's a lot of eyes on every approval to ensure that that money is truly managed per the contract. What what we see, the other thing that we see when you talk a lot about the agency and the agency's involvement and how critical that trust and relationship is, the other thing we see is sometimes there's misunderstandings. Sometimes there's disagreement on items around the money. That's often the common areas, lost wages, bed rest, travel, things like this. What we find is typically in most cases when there is a misunderstanding or disagreement, usually our team can say, look, here's what the contract says, here's what's typical, and everybody can come to an understanding. In some cases, if that doesn't get us there, the agency also comes in and says, yes, this is also correct. And then most cases then move forward with, yep, okay, this is what's in the contract. We understand. In cases, and there's a very small percentage of cases where it's gray or people want another confirmation, another expert look, and then we bring in the attorneys to also verify that the contract is what it says. What I find is a best practice is for the parents and the surrogates to just trust the professionals to guide that process because you don't want to have these negotiations or tension between the family and the surrogate. How do you guide or talk to families about this dynamic?
So our recommendation is actually that intended parents, if they have a concern, that they talk to us first. Because sometimes it's much easier for us to just kind of bring it up or to dig into the issue. And sometimes it's something silly like, let's say the contract says 1 cup of coffee per day, right? And so they see on Facebook, or she mentions that she got, I don't know, a double espresso latte, venti double espresso latte or something. And they're like, well, I thought it would just be a cup of coffee. It has this much sugar and it has this much caffeine and it has what, you know, when you get panicked or upset about something, it's always best to talk to a sounding board first so that then it can be relayed or handled in a way that isn't going to necessarily interfere with that relationship. And so, whether it be travel or whatever, because at least for us, we book all of our travel for our surrogates. So that way you're not having to worry about the surrogate picking, I don't know, first class tickets on the most expensive airline or whatever, because it's not her money, which is sometimes something that, they will think, intended parents might think. We're looking for something reasonable, but we're also, trying to not have her land at 1 a.m. in the morning. Like we're trying to find that kind of balance. And so we're kind of looking out for everyone in those cases. So talk to your agency, have a good relationship with them, and also remember, like it's an emotional journey for you, but it's also an emotional journey for your surrogate. So I know with my very first surrogacy journey, um, transfer was actually delayed a little bit. I mean, not by days, but like a little bit of time because the intended mother was arguing, wanting them to transfer more than two embryos. Was arguing with the doctor and because she really wanted twins. And the doctor was good. He refused. We only transferred two embryos. Both of them took, carried twins, no problem. I think they were going to stay there forever. I had to be induced at like 38 weeks plus a few days. But when she called, my HCG levels, which is like your pregnancy hormone levels, were not they were not high enough that they were like, oh, it's definitely twins. I mean, I was very definitely pregnant, but it was not like, oh, absolutely it's twins. And the policy at that point was for that clinic was to call the intended parents, give them the result, and then the intended parents would give the result to the surrogate. And so when she called me, she's like, well, I guess I should say congratulations, but I'm really disappointed. And so while she had her own things going on, for me it was like, but wait, but I'm pregnant. Like that's a good thing. So
Right.
having someone that can kind of help maneuver all of those things that you still have someone to talk to. And sometimes, honestly, we need to bring in a mental health professional to kind of help navigate some of those big feelings and help come to a compromise. And so it's your agency that can kind of help maneuver that of when it's something simple and that's needed or when you need to bring in an outside, mental health professional because the feelings are big enough to kind of just help maneuver through that system, but keep the relationship intact.
Yeah, it is amazing how a lot of the conflict is just purely emotional and reactionary. And gosh, it's kind of hard not to be emotional through these journeys. There's so much at risk and at stake and on both sides, right? So I couldn't agree more to that sentiment of when you're uncomfortable, you're not sure, don't accuse, don't lash out, talk to the professionals first, especially the agencies, and have that sounding board before you interject with the relationship. I think that's great advice. I would see that resolving a lot of issues we're dealing with on a daily basis.
Yes.
Um, Lisa, what advice would you have for a surrogate?
For the surrogate, I would say, just remember that it took a lot before the parents got to this point. So before they ever came to you, to look for a surrogate. And so it's hard and they have a whole journey before they got here. So for a surrogate, in most cases, we've never had any failure, right? Like we have always gotten pregnant. All of our pregnancies have been smooth. All of our deliveries have been smooth. And there's not a lot of understanding about how difficult like this journey can be and how as you're going through this journey, if they have a history of miscarriages, that means that they're hitting all of these anniversary milestones of those losses throughout the pregnancy. And so while you aren't really aware of that, they are having an emotional journey through all of this. And so if all of their miscarriages, let's say, were early term miscarriages, then that's great once you get past that point. But if they had, let's say, 20-week, miscarriages or some later, or maybe something happened during delivery, they can have a lot of anxiety and a lot of trauma that they're dealing with. So try and be understanding and kind, and don't judge isn't the right word. Um, but if they do things differently, if they're not reacting the way that you think would be normal, just try and be understanding, talk to your agency. There's always mental health professionals as well to kind of help you understand that other side, and just be open. Allow them to be as much a part of the process as they can so that they can experience, the joyful side, because this, for a lot of parents, is their first joyful experience. And so they can be a little bit guarded. And so just try and make it as much for them as possible.
That's great advice. I mean, what surrogates do and sacrifice personally for families is absolutely amazing, right? And there's so much that goes into it, but I think that thought of being understanding is critical. And I think your prior point around, look, there's a lot of emotions and hormones, and it's a journey, right? So when there is something that they want to react to, I think go to your agency as well, right? I mean,
Right.
because you don't want to be perceived as just trying to do something in your own interest or against the parents to hurt that relationship, because it's a long-standing relationship. I think go to the agency, right? I mean, and let them
Right.
be that sounding board. I think that's also beautiful advice for the surrogate.
And there might be a way to present whatever the issue is, to either side, right? In a way that isn't going to maybe sound the same way as it does when it's your issue, right?
Right.
Because the parents, for a lot of these parents, they are literally putting their heart and soul and their whole future, like, to make this happen so that they can have this baby. And then for on the surrogate side, like, her whole family is putting their whole life on hold for as long as this journey takes. And that, if everything goes perfectly, that's a year. And in a lot of cases, it's 2 years. It can be longer if there's failed transfers or different things to make it take longer. So, you know, don't assume that someone's not on your side, like, but come and talk to your agency. Let's help find a way to work it out, and then, present the the issue or whatever it is that's causing contention, in a way that people can be more receptive to.
Yes, I think especially, I think all areas, but especially it relates to legal and financial, because there can be a lot of tension in that area, right?
That's true, but it can also just be a day-to-day thing, because remember, like, this is your baby, but you can't actually control her life,
Right.
right? You can't control whether, you think she's doing too much, or she's, whatever it is that she's doing. But as friends, you're going to find out what she's doing. And I'm not saying she's doing anything reckless, because she's not. But, oh, she took her kids to their soccer game and she's sitting out in the sun, all day. Is that okay? And a lot of this just kind of normal worries. So that there is a lack of control there, which can be hard to deal with. And so I think just that day-to-day type of thing, which is why having a good relationship with your surrogate is really, really helpful and really key. Because if you already know, and, not that you know her at the beginning, but if you develop a relationship with trust, where you know that your surrogate is going to do what's best, that really helps alleviate a lot of that, instead of assuming like a more business relationship, or this, it should be like this, and you don't have that much. We're only going to talk after doctor's appointments, and, it just, having that relationship can just make everything go a whole lot easier.
Absolutely. What should surrogates know about the money component and about escrow?
So as far as escrow, never So sometimes with independent journeys, surrogates will think that it's okay to bypass like escrow. And I would say never. Like just you always, I don't care if there's no other professional involved. Well, I mean, you need attorneys and things like that, but like even if you're doing an independent journey, do not compromise on escrow. Like the escrow fee is such a minute piece of this whole journey, but it's the one thing that ensures that you don't have medical bills that are out there in your name that are unpaid and things like that, and that the contract is actually followed without having to file a lawsuit or something like that to try and get that money. So you need to have escrow. Um, what was your other question again?
Yeah, just what common areas are there
Oh,
that
compensation. That was the other
compensation?
thing.
No, just
Yeah.
areas that cause confusion or concern around the compensation or the terms and the financial terms or with escrow.
Yeah, so that I think the biggest misleading piece in compensation is when people are going and looking online and they see numbers. They don't know all of the pieces and what's being counted in those numbers and what's not being counted.
Right.
So, for example, you can look at an ad and it'll say, oh, $80,000, $90,000, whatever. But are they counting things like health insurance premiums? Like life insurance policies and a certain amount of lost wages. Like, what are they counting? Because a lot of times surrogates will look at an ad and they will think, oh, that's the base compensation.
Right.
And that's just not the case. But also on the other side of it is you're not paying things like your travel or your medical bills or things like that out of your compensation. The point of the compensation is actually just to help offset the inconvenience, the time that you're taking to go to all your appointments, the things changing your life, which in reality, you are changing your life because you're pregnant, and that's true for every pregnancy, but especially a surrogacy pregnancy because there's additional limitations. And then also the risk that you're taking because every pregnancy carries, a health risk. And that's true of any pregnancy. It's not more true with surrogacy. Sometimes people think because we explain that to them about surrogacy that it's only true in surrogacy, but it's not. It's just that when you get pregnant with your own baby, no one sits you down and says, okay, so here's the risks to your health. Um, so it's just I think that's the biggest thing is really gather all the information, get the details. No one knows what it's going to be worth for you and your family except for you. And just because the numbers are higher does not necessarily mean it's going to be a better journey or that it's going to be more worth it. Because really, what makes it worth it is your relationship with the parents and seeing their lives change. Like these parents have worked so hard, and you're the one person that is making this dream come true for them. I mean, if you talk to any surrogate, seeing the parents hold their baby for the very first time in the delivery room when they're actually like, oh my gosh, this is real. Like, we actually have our baby now. There's not many people in the world that can say, I know I made a difference. Like, I made a difference in the world. I know that I did. But surrogates get to say that. And that's really what makes it worth it more than anything else. And so this compensation is just to kind of offset all of your sacrifices to get to that point.
That's beautiful. And it really is. Surrogates are really a special cohort of humans doing amazing work to help other people. It's um and like you said, they're a risk. I think, in thinking about escrow, what we see is a lot of surrogates, similarly to the parents, don't understand that the role of escrow is to ensure that they are protected as well. And that the money in escrow has to be used per that contract. And we have to follow the law of that contract. So if they're due that money, the money has to be paid, right? And a
Right.
frivolous argument or a disagreement around the cup of coffee or the Facebook friendship or things that aren't real disputes will still get paid, and that protects them. because what surrogates shouldn't have happen is they're doing such a beautiful thing to help a family, right? And they shouldn't be in a situation to where money is a problem, where they're also taking financial risks that they shouldn't take with their medical bills and so forth. So again, I think surrogates knowing that they can also lean on the escrow company to ask questions about their compensation and also their agency or terms of payments or what it means in the contract, what's due or what's not. I think it's really important, and the surrogate should ensure, in our opinion, that the escrow company is there with their interest as well. Uh,
Well, and I
which
think you're the only escrow company that I know of that has someone dedicated literally just to help you learn how to use the portal, to answer your questions, all of those types of things about, how does this work? How do I submit, for reimbursement? How long is that going to take? Like you have a dedicated person that is just there to do that.
absolutely. Look, the goal is to make the financial piece secondary so the surrogate can focus on the pregnancy and taking care of that baby, right? And the
Right.
beautiful relationship with the family. Uh, let's, in respect to time, let's pull up a little bit. Lisa, you and I do a lot of work together more broadly for the industry at SEEDS, the Society for Ethics and Donation and Surrogacy. We had the pleasure of serving on the board after many years of volunteering in other capacities in committees and as officers. When you look holistically at the industry and the work we're doing and some of the beautiful things and also some of the threats, what would you like to share there?
I think as a whole that professionals really are trying to do better, right? The nice thing about Seeds is it's the one place where all the professionals kind of come together um, to get the same information. So there's Quad A, which is just for the attorneys. There's ASRM. There's different organizations for separate professionals, but Seeds is one where we kind of all come together to really work to just make the journey better for everyone. And so as much as, the only things, of course, that we usually hear in the media are the negative things. Um, it's the professionals at Seas that are really dedicated to like doing it right, doing it well, and kind of defining what those best practices are. And we have those conversations like all the time, and sometimes they're debated. As professionals, are not always in agreement about certain things. But as a whole, like we're really trying to make sure that journeys are safer for everyone. And there's a large group of professionals that are working towards that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things coming from a different industry, like I came from banking, I've worked in banking for a decade at all levels. But it's amazing for me that this industry, there's a major spirit of let's self-regulate, let's improve the industry, let's work really hard to do the right thing. And I think Seeds is a place which is taking that spirit and organizing it under a vast membership into standards and guidelines that we're working to enforce, right? So people that are ultimately signing up for that will say, look, I am doing it right and I want to follow the rules. And that should be a good signal for parents and surrogates and donors of who to work with because they care to do it the right way, or to be part of an organization setting these guidelines to improve things. I think you and I have had the conversation many times. I mean, the true north of what we're doing in this industry, and I think the industry is made up of a whole bunch of amazing humans who really care for most about helping families. And most of us sacrifice significantly, personally, with our time, because this isn't a 9 to 5. It's an around the clock um, process and journey and we want to just help as many families as we can. And then there are some bad actors that creep in or that turn bad or that just make major mistakes, right? So I think these ethics and rules really matter. And I'm proud to be one of the people and proud to work along you as people who are trying to make it better with the true north of ultimately making the process safer and more secure, right?
Right. And I think that having an organization like Seeds also provides guidance to intended parents and surrogates because now instead of talking to one professional, whether it be an agency, an attorney, or whatever, that says, oh, this is how it's done, you now have a place to go and look. And I mean, you can go to the website and pull down the standards and you can look, okay, so you have now a list that you know this is how it's supposed to be done. So that if you see or hear or anything of something that's not like that, like that's not what's happening, then you know that can be a red flag for you at the beginning because so I think it really goes to help educate not only professionals and especially newer industry professionals that haven't had a chance to learn from experience. Like all of these standards are based off of, we've all learned, we've seen things that, when they haven't been done correctly, and that's where these things came from, all of these standards. And so you get that experience, but also it allows for surrogates and intended parents to know, okay, this is how it should be done. And so when they're interviewing professionals, they have that as a starting list of just knowing how things should happen.
Absolutely. We're proud of the work the organization's doing, and I think I've said this to you a bunch. I think you're probably one of the hardest working Seeds volunteers there is, and so grateful for what you do as well. So, well, Lisa, this has been amazing. If people want to get to know you better or learn more about your agency, what's the best way for them to contact you?
They can just go to our website, which is gsmoms.com. If they're interested in Uganda, then it's hostmomsuganda.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time today, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
I've enjoyed it as well. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye bye.